Case file: The Window Incidents. 1911. Peter Pan was never the hero. In the winter of 1911, several families in London began reporting the same strange thing. Their children had started hearing unusual sounds at night. Soft tapping on the window, footsteps on the roof, and sometimes a shadow standing quietly in the corner of the room. At first, no one took these stories seriously, because the children all described the same thing. A boy, dressed in green, smiling, and never growing older. They whispered his name, Peter Pan. For years, people believed that name belonged to a fairy tale, a bedtime story, a harmless piece of imagination. But in the archived records of the London police, there are several files that were quietly closed. And in those files, the same word appears again and again: window. Because some children did not leave through the door. They did not disappear in the streets. There were no signs of kidnapping, no struggle. They simply went to sleep at night. And by morning, they were gone. Their windows were open, and sometimes something strange was left behind in the room. A thin layer of golden dust. This is not a fairy tale. This is a missing children case. And some families still insist on the same thing. Whatever took them was not human. 1. The first file. The first recorded incident came from the Whitmore family in North London. Date: December 12th, 1911. Missing child, Edward Whitmore. Age: 8. According to the mother's statement, the child appeared completely normal that evening. He was put to bed around 9:10 p.m. The next morning, at 6:40 a.m., his bed was empty. All doors in the house were locked from the inside. The back door was closed. There were no footprints on the stairs. No signs of forced entry. But inside the boy's room, 3 unusual details were recorded. The window was open. The curtain was slightly pushed outward. A thin layer of golden dust was found on the windowsill. Police initially assumed it was ash from the fireplace or dirt carried in by the wind. But the mother insisted on something else. That dust wasn't there before. She also added something strange. For 3 nights before he vanished, Edward had repeated the same sentence. "If he comes tonight, I'll go with him." When police asked who, the mother answered quietly, "Peter Pan." The statement was written down, but next to it, the officer added one word: childish imagination. The case was suspended 3 weeks later. Edward Whitmore was never found. 2. The same story, different homes. After the Whitmore case, similar disappearances began appearing across London. January 1912, February 1912, March 1912. The missing children were all between 7 and 12 years old, and the cases shared several strange similarities. The disappearance always happened at night. The child had shown sleep disturbances days before. The bedroom window was open. Some children had spoken about flying, and many families reported hearing the same name, Peter Pan. Newspapers slowly began noticing the pattern, but they avoided using the name directly. Instead, they called them the Window Children, the night disappearances. Some journalists suggested a secret child trafficking network, but police never found a single adult suspect. No vehicles, no escape routes. One investigator wrote in his private notes, "It does not feel like these children are being taken. It feels like they are being called." 3. The Wendy Bell case. One of the most disturbing cases occurred in spring of 1912. Missing child, Wendy Bell, age 11. But Wendy did not disappear permanently. Not at first. According to her parents, the girl reappeared in her bed 2 days after vanishing. All doors were still locked. The window was open again. But Wendy was lying in bed, alive, breathing, yet completely silent. A doctor was called. He reported no physical injuries, but the girl stared at the wall for nearly 3 hours without speaking. Then, just before dawn, she whispered her first sentence. "Don't close the window. He will find me again." Her parents didn't understand. When asked what she meant, Wendy said something even stranger. The children who disappear are not dead, but they are not the same anymore either. Investigators assumed trauma, but the drawings Wendy made were far more unsettling. According to the archived file, they showed an open window floating in the sky, a dark island with no stars, a boy with no shadow, and other children whose faces were blurred away. 3 nights later, Wendy Bell disappeared again. This time, she never returned. The only thing found on her bed was a small note written in her own handwriting. It said, "He says mothers always close the windows too early." 3. The Wendy Bell case. One of the most disturbing cases occurred in spring of 1912. Missing child, Wendy Bell, age 11. But Wendy did not disappear permanently. Not at first. According to her parents, the girl reappeared in her bed 2 days after vanishing. All doors were still locked. The window was open again, but Wendy was lying in bed, alive, breathing, yet completely silent. A doctor was called. He reported no physical injuries, but the girl stared at the wall for nearly 3 hours without speaking. Then, just before dawn, she whispered her first sentence. "Don't close the window. He will find me again." Her parents didn't understand. When asked what she meant, Wendy said something even stranger. "The children who disappear are not dead, but they are not the same anymore either." Investigators assumed trauma, But the drawings Wendy made were far more unsettling. According to the archived file, they showed an open window floating in the sky, a dark island with no stars, a boy with no shadow, and other children whose faces were blurred away. 3 nights later, Wendy Bell disappeared again. This time, she never returned. The only thing found on her bed was a small note written in her own handwriting. It said, "He says mothers always close the windows too early." 4. The Neverland Theory. At first, these incidents were treated as criminal investigations. But psychologists, priests, and private researchers began forming different theories. Several children had described the same place, an island, but not a normal island. There was no sea, no horizon. It felt like a place outside the world. Some children called it Neverland. The word did not first appear in Wendy's case. Earlier missing children had whispered it during sleep. One recorded statement from a child says, "There are no mothers there. There is no mourning. And no one ever grows old." At first, this sounded like childish fantasy. But a priest wrote something disturbing in his notes. What if Neverland is not a paradise for children? What if it is a place they cannot return from? This theory was never officially recognized. But in the closed files, the word Neverland appeared repeatedly. 5. The real face of Peter. In fairy tales, Peter Pan represents freedom, adventure, flying. But the Peter described in these files is something else entirely. According to the children's testimonies, he appears at night. He knows your name before you say it. He makes you feel understood. He doesn't enter through fear. He enters through loneliness. Many of the missing children had something in common. They were emotionally vulnerable. One had recently lost a parent. One was afraid of his father. One was constantly alone. One was ill and unable to attend school. Another had confessed he was afraid of growing up. Peter Pan did not take children by force. He convinced them. At first, it felt like a game, an escape, freedom. But the children who briefly returned said something darker. Peter made you feel special. Then he whispered the same promise. If you stay here, they will forget you. If you come with me, you will never grow up. For a child, there may be no more powerful trap, no responsibility, no pain, no time. But eventually, some children realize something. Peter Pan wasn't protecting them. He was keeping them. 6. The Lost Boys. Official records never mention a group called the Lost Boys, but several investigators used that phrase privately. One detective wrote, "Some of the missing may no longer be missing. Perhaps they simply belong somewhere else now." And then he added in parentheses, "Lost Boys." The theory suggested Peter Pan was not alone. Children who had been taken before were still there, but something about them had changed. Some witnesses claimed the children there forgot their names. Others said they could no longer recognize their own faces in mirrors. One girl described it this way: "If you stay too long, you forget what your mother sounds like." Another child said, "Peter likes the ones who cry the most. They are easier to take." 7. The Light. Some reports claim Peter Pan was not alone when he arrived. A small light often appeared first, tiny, fast, golden. Children described it as a fairy. Others thought it looked like a living spark, but 3 separate reports mentioned the same name: Tinkerbell. One child said the light would tap against the window first, then it would circle the room, and only after that would Peter appear. A mother once described something chilling. "My son was laughing in his sleep. Then I saw a small light in the room. When it noticed me, it vanished." The next morning, her son was gone. 8. The Last File. The final major case recorded in these archives belonged to a boy named Arthur Miles, age 9. The day before he disappeared, Arthur gave his teacher a drawing. It showed an open window, a dark sky, and 3 small figures flying. When the teacher asked what it meant, Arthur answered calmly, "If I go tomorrow night, don't look for me. I might not want to come back." The next morning, Arthur was gone. His bedroom window was open. The curtain hung outside in the cold air. And on the bed was a single unfinished sentence: "Second star." The phrase was incomplete, but investigators later noticed other missing children had whispered the same words: a direction, a signal, a path. After that case, the incidents slowly disappeared from official reports, not because they stopped, but because they were recorded under different explanations. Sleepwalking, runaways, unidentified disappearances. And gradually, the name Peter Pan was removed from the files. Because sometimes it is easier to erase something than to explain it. 9. Conclusion. Most people remember Peter Pan as a symbol of childhood, freedom, adventure. But the Peter Pan described in these files is something else entirely. He does not enter through doors. He enters through longing, through loneliness, through the quiet fear of growing up. And once he reaches you, he offers the same promise: never grow up, never go back, and never return home. That is why in some old houses in London, grandmothers still tell their grandchildren one simple thing before bedtime: close the window, because Peter Pan was never the hero. And perhaps he was never really a child at all.